Hello one, hello all, it's your boy Scoopingo back at it again. Oh my, it's been a minute. Here we are, it's the end of the year, 2020, start of a new decade, start of a new year. But we gotta talk about 2019, which was a really, really good year for movies. It was actually like phenomenal, one of my favorites, honestly. But before we get to the best of 2019, let's talk about some of the worst. So without further ado, and again, this is my opinion before anyone goes into the comments wanting to rip my throat out, let's just get that out of the way. And without further ado, let's just dive right into this. Before I even start, really, I just want to do an honorable mention, and that's Greta came out earlier this year. There's a certain scene where this lady's just staring outside a window. Like, you know those scenes where someone's just staring outside the window and then, like, a car passes them and then they disappear? Something like that. We've seen that 1,000 times. But in this movie, they do it in a really weird and abrupt way, and I was just very taken aback. But I will put it in the honorable mentions. This is like kind of in purgatory because it's not really terrible, but like I also found it like baffling for all the wrong reasons. I will say there is like one really clever sequence in the middle of the movie that in the beginning of it I was like, oh my god, there's no way they're gonna do this. But by the end of that same sequence, I was like, oh my god, that was actually really, really clever. The fact that I didn't believe that this movie could pull something like that out of its bag says something. So that being said, honorable mention Greta. To be fair to Escape Room, like this is where the disappointment part of this list comes in. Escape Room was actually a pretty entertaining movie for what it was up until a certain point. And I mean, I don't remember much from the movie, so I can't say it's like incredible. But I do remember like kind of enjoying what I was watching. I knew what I was getting into, so I was like, all right, this is pretty fun, kind of like a Saw vibe. But as we all found out this year, your movie is really just as good as your ending is. And Escape Room has one of the worst endings I've seen in a movie this year, like hands down. Instead of just ending the movie, because I think if this movie just ended, it just gave it its end, and that was it. We're like, okay, we get to end to the story. Maybe people would actually be interested in seeing a number two, which is happening regardless. But they decided to put what felt like an end credit scene in the end of the movie. Scrap the ending of the movie. We're just gonna make this ending feel like stick around for number two. That's basically what happened. And I was just while I was watching that, my jaw was on the ground. I was like, I cannot believe this movie is doing this to us right now. In the Tall Grass, and I actually put a review up on Letterboxd. It was like 10 minutes in, I was like, wow, this movie is starting bad because the acting is just almost unwatchable. But I was giving it a chance, I was watching the movie for what it was, and like again, I knew what I was getting into. Uh, Shouts out to Netflix, by the way. They have been killing it this year. Irishman, Marriage Story, but they've also been trying to kill me with these movies this year. um, in the Tall Grass, like I said, 10 minutes in, I was like, this is not going to be anything I'm going to enjoy. But actually, 20 minutes in, as this movie was like revealing its premise, because I don't watch trailers, as this movie was like revealing itself to me, I was like, wow, this is actually pretty interesting. I wonder how they're going to be able to make this go on for, an hour and a half, whatever the runtime was. And the answer is that it doesn't really do that. Is as interesting as it gets is that 20-minute mark where it's like, wow, this is a really interesting concept. And then, to be fair, they do try some things, some really weird things, but it's ultimately falls flat. It is almost a little too ridiculous for its own good. And that's weird because of what the premise is, but I think that if they made it a little bit more grounded and just kept it on the ground, it would have been probably a better movie. And to be honest, it would have just made for a better movie if it was a short film, let's be honest. Godzilla, King of the Monsters. I don't even remember if that was the name of the movie, but I know it's Godzilla, and I know that I was bored to tears. This movie had a great cast. They did nothing with it. This movie, before going into it, actually, I remember just the trailers. Like, I didn't watch the trailers, but every time I would see it on TV or, like, in passing, whatever, I remember I was like, wow, the colors are really great. The posters are really great for this movie. This movie is going to be amazing, and I was like really looking forward to it. So the fact that I got in and I was just bored to tears in a monster movie. How can I be bored in a monster movie? Like, I know what I'm getting into. I'm getting into a monster running around and destroying shit. Like, how could this movie be so boring with all that? They found a way. Let's throw in all these characters that no one cares about and let's not build them at all and let's just put them at the forefront of the movie. I'm saying all this out loud and it doesn't make sense. It really does not. And the fact that that's what ended up transpiring in the movie just baffles me even more. This movie was terrible. Shouts out to Netflix, Tall Girl. This movie was at the forefront of so many memes this year, and rightfully so. I mean, the premise itself is ridiculous. It's about a girl who's really tall and she gets bullied because of it, and it's not uncommon. If we're all being real, like, I'm sure that happens, but okay. The story is very bare bones, and I understand that this movie is not intended for me. I understand that it's probably intended for like girls in high school or middle school. But even still, God, this movie is so terrible. There's nothing memorable about Tall Girl. I'm like trying to think of like why this movie sucks, but this movie is just so bad. It's like a really like badly made sitcom for TV that like goes on for like maybe one season and gets canceled immediately. With laugh tracks and like really bad forced jokes. It was that. Except in movie form, and I had to sit through it, and it was really painful, and the very end was astronomically bad. Number one worst movie of the year, hands down, undoubtedly. Oh my God, was this movie a chore to watch? Jesus. The Haunting of Sharon Tate. This is nothing new. We're two movies with kind of the same idea or like same premise, not same premise, but like same ideas come out in the same year, and one is like pretty good to great, and then the other is just like really, really bad. That is like, wow. And this is the case here. So obviously the polar opposite is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, written by Quentin Tarantino, and then there's this movie with Hilary Duff about Sharon Tate. Obviously, if you've seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sharon Tate is not at the forefront of that movie, but Sharon Tate is in the forefront of this movie. I don't understand, and like there is a right way to do this, by the way. First of all, it's like really disrespectful, but if you want to make this story about what happened to Sharon Tate and give it the spin of what actually happened, or like there's these robbers breaking in and this, that, and the third, or why they did it, there's a way to do it. Like just write a decent story behind it, and then even if the movie was like, even if everything was bare bones and like it didn't even make through the first draft, like all they had was the first draft and they were like, all right, let's shoot this, let's go. Even if they did that, this movie would have ended up better than what we actually got. Do you know when you're watching a thriller or a horror movie and like you get those scenes where the camera's just panning up to a corner or something, like you're in a hallway and it just turns a corner and then maybe you get a jump scare, or maybe it's like a dog and you're like, it's kind of a fake out jump scare. This movie did that, but it would go down that hallway, turn a corner, and then it would go down the next hallway. I don't know if it was trying to be clever, where like, oh, we got you on this jump scare, but it wasn't a jump scare, and then it would do it again, and it wasn't a jump scare again. This movie was just trying to sell me this house. I don't understand it. I fell asleep during this movie twice, and I hate that. I try to pay attention to every movie that I watch, but this movie made it impossible for me to do so. Ladies and gentlemen, oh my God. The worst movie of the year. If you wanted to watch this movie, it would be a chore. I would dare you to do it, but I wouldn't want to make you sit through that. Ladies and gentlemen, the worst movie of the year is Sharon Tate, The Haunting of Sharon Tate. It's on Amazon Prime. That's how I seen it. So if you want to see a really bad movie, you could do that. Ladies and gentlemen, if you like this video, you can leave a like. And if you like what you saw, you can subscribe for more videos from me. I have a top 10 best of the year coming up. Like I said before, I am Scoopingo from the 5th row, and I'm gone.